Hello, it's your Uncle Spurt here, and for the past week I've had my SIM secreted inside of the POCO F7. So I've already had the POCO F7 Pro and the POCO F7 Ultra stashed in my pants, and now with slightly less fanfare, fireworks and enthusiastic rubbing of thighs, POCO has spaffed out the regular bog standard F7, which actually paradoxically improves on both the Pro and the Ultra in a few ways despite being cheaper. This is my POCO F7 review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, one of the first things I prefer about the regular POCO F7 compared with the Pro and Ultra models is the design. The aesthetics on the Pro and the Ultra models never really got my heart throbbing, or indeed any other part of me, whereas the regular POCO F7 seems to have a bit more style, says the terminally uncool middle-aged man. You've once again got a two-tone finish around back, this time with a diagonal split, funky, while the camera bumps have also been jazzed up a wee bit, again with a diagonal split separating the two lenses, complete with a slick bit of green highlighting. And the black and the white models look pretty smart, but the highlight is certainly this here silver edition. So here you've once again got that two-tone finish with the diagonal split and metallic coloration down below, although it's definitely not metal. And then up top you've got a transparent vibe, so you can see lots of little details, teeny wee screws, bit of limited edition action, the Snapdragon logo. It's quite a sharp contrast, but I really like it. The only ball ache with the design of the POCO F7 is it is a glossy finish, which unfortunately means this bottom section does get rather greasy and smudgy. You do also have the exact same problem with the black model of the POCO F7. But the white model actually features an all matte back, so it doesn't get anywhere near as smudgy and nasty. So if you're particularly averse to a bit of grime and muck, well, white is the way to go. But anyway, for the POCO F7, you've got a glass back, you've got metal edges, thankfully. So that's a slightly more premium vibe, and I believe it's a metal trim around the camera bump as well. And then up front, thankfully, once again, Gorilla Glass 7i, which is pleasingly scratch resistant, and POCO has also slapped a pre-installed screen protector on there. As you can see, there are reasonably skinny bezels surrounding that display, so not much added bulk. And I was very pleased to see that the regular POCO F7 is once again IP68 water and dust resistant, so it can get fully submerged in water, no worries. Take it to the beach, whatever you fancy. In fact, my only real complaint, besides the fact it gets a bit too grotty after lots of fingering, is the fact that the POCO F7's design is still a bit too iPhone-y for my liking, from the completely flat edges to the slightly chunky finish. Like if it wasn't for the POCO F7's interesting back end, the silky smooth display, the generous amounts of storage stuffed in here, the excellent battery life, and of course the affordable asking price, I'd swear I was using some god-awful Apple piece of shit. Now, the posh ultrasonic fingerprint scanner of the Pro and the Ultra models has been downgraded for the vanilla POCO F7 to a basic optical fingerprint sensor. But thankfully, this is still pretty decent. As long as your mitts aren't moist, it's super responsive, as you can see, straight into your desktops. And the POCO F7 is, of course, completely up to date. As you can see, the HyperOS version 2 slapped on top of Android 15. And no worries as far as the software support is concerned, because the POCO F7 should receive the same 4 Android OS updates and 6 years of security patching that the Pro and the Ultra enjoy. Of course, HyperOS is a wee bit marmitey. You either love it or you hate it. Personally, one thing I certainly do not enjoy is the sheer volume of crapware stuffed on here, most of which thankfully can be removed, but it'll take you a wee while to actually go through and uninstall it all, because there's just so bloody much of it. And I wasn't exactly shocked, shall we say, to discover that the POCO F7 can be a wee bit buggy at times when I used it this past week. Nothing horrendous, thankfully. I haven't seen any app crashes or anything like that, but a couple of times, for instance, I tapped on a text box in a website and no virtual on-screen keyboard actually popped up to let me input stuff. Super helpful. And just little things like getting your own wallpaper on here can be more complicated than you would actually expect it to be. You've got to go to My Account and then Wallpapers and then tap this little plus button down here and then go into an app and then select the wallpaper. It's just more steps than it absolutely needs to be, but hey, if you're used to HyperOS, you'll know what you're getting into here. And to be fair, it does add some pretty banging features such as an excellent gaming mode and some pretty nifty video tools as well. And I was also annoyed to discover that there's no always on display on the POCO F7, despite the fact it quite clearly offers one. You've only got the option of displaying the always on display when you tap the screen or when somebody glances at it. And of course, the glancing thing only actually works if you're holding the POCO F7 and pointing it at your face, not if it's sat beside you on a table or a desk or whatever. So completely f***ing useless. But hey, at least the POCO F7 comes with 256 gigs of storage as standard. You can boost that to 512 gigs just by hoying an extra 50 quid at POCO. So that's super generous compared with what the likes of Apple and Google offer. Oh, but one more wee grumble about the POCO F7. You've got support for dual physical SIMs, but there is once again bugger all support for eSIM, which is particularly annoying if you do a lot of traveling. Now, the regular POCO F7 actually boasts a bigger screen versus the Pro and Ultra models. It's a 6.83-inch AMOLED panel. So even old gits with knackered old peepers like your Uncle Spurt have absolutely no issues seeing what is going on. So 2772 by 1280 pixel resolutions. You've still got reasonably crisp visuals, despite the fact this thing is basically a telly in your pocket. And not only do you have HDR10 streaming support, you've also got Dolby Vision support in the likes of Netflix, which is pretty rare for a mid-range smartphone. And that screen is almost as bright as the Pro and the Ultra displays. It's clearly visible even on a super bright sunshiny day. Although when the brightness is boosted all the way up, the colours are quite obviously saturated and everything looks slightly surreal. But speaking of colours, you can once again tinker around with these in the display settings. You've got 3840Hz PWM dimming, as well as the usual reading mode shenanigans to give your peepers a rest in the evenings. And as you'd expect, at least from an Android smartphone, the refresh rate scales up to 120Hz. And even though the UK has gone through a bit of a sunny spell at the moment, I was pleased to see that that screen is nice and responsive even when it's sopping wet. And the POCO F7 once again boasts a pretty banging pair of stereo speakers. Once again, nice and loud when you max out that volume with pretty crisp clarity, although the balance is somewhat off. That bottom mounted speaker is certainly more powerful than the slightly tinny earpiece speaker. No headphone jack here on the POCO F7 of course, sadly, but the Bluetooth streaming's been absolutely flawless and you do have full Dolby Atmos as well as Xiaomi sound support. And all the usual EQ shenanigans. But what about the performance? Well, the POCO F7 is powered by the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 chipset that was recently stuffed inside of the iQOO Neo 10, which I only just reviewed. And indeed, Nothing has just announced that the 8S Gen 4 will be powering its fresh new Nothing Phone 3 flagship. And here on the POCO F7, in the UK models at least, that's backed by 12 gigs of RAM. And the everyday running on the POCO F7 has been a pretty slick, judder-free experience. But of course, to really test that performance, I slapped on a good bit of Wuthering Waves, one of the most intensive Android titles out there, kicking the graphics settings right up to the maximum level. And then I flicked on HyperOS's Wild Boost mode and got down to some serious running about the place, having my arse absolutely handed to me by random gribbly things. Now, I did notice that iQOO Neo 10 smartphone did get rather toasty when gaming, which I put down to the 8S Gen 4. And unfortunately, I found that the situation was much the same here on the POCO F7, despite its liquid cool 4 tech. The phone did get uncomfortably hot to hold after just 30 minutes of gaming on Wuthering Waves with all of the settings maxed out. The frame rate still stayed pretty stable, however. It did dip occasionally to around the 45-ish frames per second level, but it was mostly above 50, even in quite prolonged gaming sessions. But I didn't dare to play for much longer than an hour because by that point my fingers were already getting pretty damn sweaty. But of course, gaming on the likes of PUBG, Call of Duty won't trouble the POCO F7 quite as much, and it can handle those more intensive games like Wuthering Waves and Genshin Impact no problem. Just gets a wee bit toasty. And of course, one of the absolute all-time highlights of the POCO F7 is the ludicrously huge 6,500 mAh capacity battery that beats the Pro and the Ultra model, really making the most of that extra space. I started each day with a fully charged POCO F7, and I think the lowest I ever saw that battery meter drain to was around 25%, but that was on a crazy long, super intensive day, loads of screen on time, a few hours of Android Auto action, bit of video chat shenanigans, plenty of camera play. So even the most demanding of users should be super happy having this thing stashed in their shorts. Of course, I did find that the F7 Pro was killed off pretty fast by a bit of Wuthering Waves, especially with that wild boost mode switched on. But the regular POCO F7 is a bit better in that regard. I managed just over 4 hours of gaming on the maximum graphic settings, around 5-ish hours with the lower graphic settings before that massive battery was fully wiped. So still not a great showing for the gaming despite that enormous capacity, but not too shabby either. And you do actually have slightly faster 90-watt wired charging here on the regular POCO F7 versus the 80-watt charging on the POCO F7 Pro. Just as well really, thanks to the increased capacity, otherwise it would take longer to charge back up. But sadly, just like the Pro, there is bugger all wireless charging support. Sad face. So far, as long as you're not averse to your smartphone being as big as King Kong's dong, the regular POCO F7 is actually looking like a better buy than the POCO F7 Pro, and actually possibly the Ultra model too, depending on what you're actually after. But of course, POCO has had to make some sacrifices to the specs in order to drop the price, and one of the areas that it has fiddled with is the camera tech. So gone is the Light Fusion 800 sensor, replaced here with Sony's 50meg IMX882 instead. And this is a smaller sensor which can't capture quite as much detail in softer light. But still, the POCO F7 copes admirably with a range of trickier conditions. You'll still get some pleasing colours and more ambient snaps, while HDR shots aren't usually oversaturated or washed out. But of course, it's always a good idea to take a couple of pics because you can randomly get very different results when shooting the same scene twice, thanks to a wee bit of unpredictable processing. And if you are shooting something that moves about the place, be prepared for quite a lot of blurry, fuzzy pics. So again, shoot away and hope for the best. Meanwhile, the F7 also sports the same basic 8-megapixel ultra-wide angle shooter as the Pro. And this is okay-ish, just don't bother with it at night or anything and you won't be too upset. And of course you've got the usual small selection of bonus camera modes. If you flick up, you've got a bit of panorama action, some slow motion video, Ultra HD, if you want to shoot in the full 50 megapixels. And you've got a pretty bloody good Pro mode as well, with lots of controls to play around with. You can once again boost the resolution to the full 50 megs, and you can also shoot in RAW format. As for the video mode, where you can capture video at up to 4K resolution at 30 or 60 frames per second. And the POCO F7 certainly does the job for recording those precious memories. My test footage is all finely detailed, the stabilization's good enough when you're wandering about and shooting simultaneously. Yeah, the digital zoom action could be a wee bit smoother, but at least when you crop in a small bit at least, things still stay reasonably crisp. And the audio capture is clear enough without too much wind feedback, although I'd stay away from particularly gusty locations. And last up at the front end of the POCO F7, there's a 20 megapixel selfie shooter, perfectly fine for your simple shareable shots. The video action here is capped off at full HD rather than 4K, although once again you can shoot at 30 or 60 frames per second. And again, the audio capture reasonably clear as long as you're not in too noisy an environment. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a tasty wee nutshell is the POCO F7, my full review after using it as my full-time smartphone for a week now. And I've got to say, it is a bit of an all-round banger, although one that does suffer from a couple of wee quirks. Can get quite toasty when playing the likes of Wuthering Waves. Of course, you've got the usual HyperOS shenanigans, and that glossy finish does get a wee bit grubby, which is a shame because otherwise it's a bit of a stunner. Of course, you can always grab the white model with its lovely matte finish instead. Anyway, that's what this bald northern chump reckons. What do you think of the POCO F7? Stay tuned for a full F7 versus Pro versus Ultra comparison, which I will be shitting out soon. And of course, if you're after possible alternatives, check out my roundup of the best mid-range smartphones right now in 2025. One of the big ones, of course, being the Nothing Phone 3A and 3A Pro, where you've also got the likes of the OnePlus Nord 5 lingering tantalizingly on the horizon. And please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, I love you!